Hello and welcome to today's e-learning webinar series. Our topic today is on Indonesia, its education system, and opportunities to explore student mobility and exchange as well as partnerships. My name is Jasmine Saidi-Kienert, and I am the President and CEO of the Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute, ACEI. Joining me today is Alan Saidi, ACEI's Senior Vice President and COO. Since its establishment in 1994, ACEI has been providing assistance to institutions, professional boards, and organizations in the U.S. and abroad with the evaluation of international education credentials. We've also been engaged in research on world education systems, studying trends, and sharing our findings through our webinar series, our monthly newsletter, the report, our blog, and ACEI's professional advisory services that include consulting, training, and executive coaching. A recorded version of today's webinar will be available and posted on our website within 72 hours, and you will receive an email from us following this webinar series that will remind you of that. We'd love to hear from you and welcome your questions, which you can enter in the chat icon in the bar that you will see in the bottom of your screen. And you can type your questions in, and we do allow for some Q&A at the end of our presentation. So without further ado, we'll begin with a few quick facts on the country of Indonesia, and then we'll look at the current developments in the country as it concerns its education development, its goals and challenges. We'll follow this with an overview of the education system, which Alan will be providing, and then culminating with a look at steps your institutions may consider pursuing in order to forge these partnerships and opportunities with your counterparts in Indonesia. So let's start with a few quick facts on the country. Indonesia is an archipelago comprised of over 17,500 islands in Southeast Asia and is home to 265 million people, 60% of which live on the island of Jakarta, and 87 of whom identify as Sunni Muslim, making it the world's largest Muslim majority nation on earth. The Indonesian capital is Jakarta, and the official language is Bahasa Indonesia. The population is dominated by a young generation. Close to 50% are under the age of 30. The country's middle class is growing rapidly and is the biggest in Southeast Asia. Indonesia's GDP as of 2017 is $3.25 trillion. It's a major exporter of crude petroleum and natural gas. In addition, it's one of the world's main suppliers of rubber, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, and produces a wide range of other commodities such as sugar, tea, tobacco, copra, and spices. It's viewed as having a promising economic future. It's projected that Indonesia will grow into the world's fourth largest economy by 2050. So you may be asking why we're focusing on Indonesia. And the answers are, well, consider this handful of economic and demographic indicators for Indonesia, and it will quickly become obvious why competition for the country's internationally mobile students is heating up. Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country, as we said earlier, with 50% of its population under the age of 30. And it's the world's 16th largest economy and one that's predicted to enter the top 10 as early as 2020 and to be the fourth largest by 2050. It's greatly in need of a more educated workforce if it is to meet growth targets. Only 7% of the workforce currently has a university education. It is sending 35% more students abroad than it did a decade ago. And Indonesia's government encourages its students to pursue advanced degrees. In the past year alone, funding for the Indonesian Endowment Fund for Education, which is a scholarship program for Indonesian students seeking master's and doctoral opportunities abroad, it has doubled, more than doubled. It's home to a rapidly expanding middle class, and it is a market within the powerful ASEAN trading bloc, which is the Association of Southwest Asian Nations. Indonesia has a long-running on-again, off-again strategy to open up its higher education systems to foreign providers. It has on the books since 2012 legislation that provides for international partnerships in higher education delivery. In the last few years, many universities in Asia, including Indonesia, have placed a renewed emphasis on improving their facilities and programs. And this has come as a reaction to the inclusion of international students as a key criterion in university rankings and accreditation. The number of international students attending Indonesian universities has increased significantly in recent years. And going forward, this trend is expected to continue following the Indonesian government's decision to allow foreign universities to open branches in the country. However, Indonesia is grappling with its own internal challenges and currently is struggling to provide high-quality, inclusive education to its people. Indonesia has much lower literacy levels than those of other Southeast Asian nations. The World Bank has recently reported that 55% of Indonesians who complete school are functionally illiterate, compared with only 14%, for example, in Vietnam. At the tertiary level, the percentage of Indonesians over the age of 25 that held a bachelor's degree in 2016 was just under 9%, which is the lowest amount compared with ASEAN member states. With unemployment rates being the highest among the university-educated Indonesians, the incentive to obtain a university degree may be low. As for the research output of Indonesian universities, which is showing signs of growth compared with that of other emerging economies, it is still very low. Public education spending as a percentage of GDP has been stagnant over the past decade. It remains below recommended levels for emerging economies of fast developing countries in the dynamic ASEAN region. In this chart, we will see the enrollment ratio at the secondary level, and as you can see from 2009 to 2017, there's a gradual increase, but it's kind of tapered off between 2015 and 2017. But on the chart on your right-hand side, the secondary education by sex, you will see that there's an equal proportion of female to male ratio of attending secondary education, and this number is rising. As far as the enrollment ratio on tertiary education on this slide, you can see the increase from 2009 to 2017, and tertiary education by sex, you can see that there's definitely a spike in the number of females enrolling in university levels between 2012 and 2017. A quick snapshot of the education system of Indonesia is as follows. Preschool starts as early as age 2 and is optional. Compulsory elementary school begins at age 6 and it runs through age 11. It's 6 years and covers grades 1 through 6. It's then followed by 3 years of junior or lower secondary, which is also compulsory, and it covers grades 7 through 9. And then we have 3 years of senior or upper secondary, but this is not compulsory and it's not free, and it's for ages between 15 and 17, and it covers grades 10 through 12. Tertiary education is tiered as undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral level. The academic year in the school systems generally lasts from July to June, with a break in December during the Muslim Eid holiday. At the tertiary level, the academic calendar typically runs from August, September to May or June and is divided into 2 semesters. But some institutions may have an additional summer semester from June to August. The medium of instruction at institutions of higher ed in Indonesia is Indonesian, but English is becoming more common for some programs, and textbooks are commonly printed in English. There have been some plans to make English mandatory at Indonesian universities, but these plans have not been realized as of today. This chart demonstrates the progression of students and the official school ages beginning at pre-primary early childhood through primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of education. The regulatory bodies that oversee the education system in Indonesia include the Ministry of Education and Culture, which oversees preschool, primary, and secondary education and is responsible for the development of the curriculum, the hiring of the teachers, and setting the national school exams, which it also administers. And since 2015, higher education in Indonesia has been under the oversight of the Ministry of Research, Technology, and Higher Education, which supervises both public and private institutions of higher ed and ensures quality control. There are also religious institutions in Indonesia, which are overseen by the powerful Ministry of Religious Affairs. Compared with how the school system is administered, higher education is generally more centrally controlled. Most higher education institutions have only very limited autonomy. And finally, all higher education institutions are mandated to seek accreditation by the National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education. Indonesia's qualification framework, as shown in this slide, was established in 2012. It's designed to help the mobility between academic programs and facilitate the recognition of prior learning. We will be referring to terminologies such as D1, D2, D3, D4 as we continue with our presentation. And what we are referring to would be these rankings in the qualifications framework. So now I will turn the presentation over to Alan, who will give you the overview on the primary and secondary as well as higher education in Indonesia.
Thank you, Jasmine. We have the general schools, which refer to primary and secondary non-sectarian schools supervised by the Ministry of Education and Culture. Parents can choose to send their children to either public state-run or private sector schools. There are also vocational schools known as Sekolah Menengah Kejuruan, or SMK, that offer vocational curriculum at grades 10 to 12. At the end of grade 12 at a vocational school, the graduates receive the Diploma 2. Some may wish to continue for a 4th year and earn a Diploma 1. This is a basic certification to directly join the workforce after their studies. Indonesia also has religious schools, which are semi-private, usually Islamic, and supervised and financed by the Ministry of Religious Affairs. These schools offer the complete 12-year cycle. Another type of school is the special needs schools, which are available for students with special needs. These are inclusion programs and special needs education units at the primary and secondary education levels. And finally, we have the international schools, which are more expensive and go beyond the minimum national curriculum requirements. The medium of instruction at the international school is typically English, and they use internationally focused curricula such as International Baccalaureate, or International General Certificate of Education, or U.S. high school curriculum. More than half or 50% of the international schools are British-oriented, while 18% are U.S. oriented. Indonesia, primary education. Let's take a quick look at the primary education known as Sekolah Dasar or SD in Indonesia. The starting age is 6 and the duration of study is 6 years, grades 1 to 6. And primary education is compulsory and free, and the Ministry of Education sets the curriculum that includes the subjects shown in this slide. Some of these schools will include local content that is relevant to the region. Religious schools will also include traditional Islamic subjects. To progress to junior secondary school, students sit for national examinations in Indonesian, math, and science. Lower or junior secondary education known as Sekolah Menengah Pertama or SMP in Indonesia lasts for 3 years, covering grades 7 to 9. This is also compulsory and free. The curriculum is set by the Ministry of Education and covers the same subjects as primary school, with some additional subjects in biology, chemistry, physics, history, and English. At the end of grade 9, students sit for national exams known as Ujian Nasional, or UN. They receive the Certificate of Junior Secondary School, Sekolah Menengah Pertama, or SMP. Students who complete the junior secondary education at the religious schools receive the equivalent certificate of completion of Madrasah Sanawiyah. Upper or senior secondary education covers grades 10, 11, and 12. It is not free and not compulsory. At the upper secondary level, students have the option of choosing between academic or vocational track. Now, the academic track is known as Sekolah Menengah Atas, or SMA, and the vocational track is known as Sekolah Menengah Kejuruan, or SMK. General academic and vocational programs can be completed at public or private schools or at an Islamic senior secondary school called Madrasah Aliyah and at Madrasah Aliyah Kejuruan that offer the vocational track. Now, in the academic track, senior secondary education lasts 3 years, grades 10 to 12. Students follow a common general academic core curriculum in grades 10, and by grade 11, they choose a stream to specialize in humanities or hard sciences. Students who are in religious schools will select religious subjects as their specialization. The curriculum is less focused on rote learning than in the past. At the end of each year, students sit for school exams, and at the end of grade 12, they must sit for external national examinations known as Ujian Nasional, or UN. Those who successfully pass the final external examinations receive the Certificate of Completion of Senior Secondary Education, referred to as Ijazah SMA or Ijazah MA if they attend an Islamic school. Those students who've dropped out of the system or were unable to access schooling can receive the Senior Secondary School Equivalent Certificate, referred to as Ijazah Paket C Setara SMA, by taking an equivalence exam in 7 subjects. The technical and vocational education and training in Indonesia takes place within the formal school system. It can also be completed informally in apprenticeship programs or through work-based training or training at governmental vocational and skill training centers, referred to as Balai Latihan Kerja, or BLK. Vocational high schools offer more than 140 different specializations, including fields like agriculture, allied health, business, and engineering technology. The SMK programs cover general education core curriculum, which include mathematics, Indonesian, English, natural sciences, social sciences, religious education, and civics, and vocational subjects. Some programs may require internships or practical training. And those students pursuing the vocational track in the formal system attend either secular vocational schools, SMKs, or religious schools, MAKs. Now, the SMKs are typically 3 years in length after ninth grade, but there are 4-year options. When they've completed the program, students sit for a national examination in both general education and vocational subjects. And the graduates of the 3-year vocational program receive a certificate of competency referred to as Ijaza SMK and the vocational area of their specialization. Graduates of the 4-year vocational program receive the Ijaza SMK and a 1-year post-secondary diploma, the D1 diploma we refer to. This slide represents the grading scale used at the upper secondary level for the results on the National Senior Secondary School exam. In this slide, you can see a sample of a diploma of senior secondary education, or the Ijaza Sekolah Menengah Atas. And here's a sample of the high school graduation diploma of SMA from a private religious high school. On the left side of the screen is the senior secondary graduation certificate. On the right side of the screen is the senior high school final examination results. Our next slide, we have the English translation of the SMA certificate and examination result transcript. And in this slide, we have the Diploma of Senior Vocational Education, Sekolah Menengah Kejuruan. Next, we have a sample of the document issued with the national examination results, Ujian Nasional. Okay, higher education in Indonesia is provided by several types of institutions, which include universities, institutes, advanced schools, polytechnics, academies, and community academies. Let's look at these institutional types individually in the next series of slides. First, we have the universities. According to the Ministry of Research and Higher Education in 2018, there were 537 universities in Indonesia. More than 90% are private. Most of the universities are large multidisciplinary institutions and offer undergraduate and graduate programs. Few of these universities offer doctoral programs. Indonesia currently has close to 4,500 universities offering 25,548 majors. This is nearly double that of China with 2,825 universities, although Indonesia's population is less than 1/5 of China's. Despite this huge number of universities, only 3 national universities in Indonesia managed to make the list of the world's top 500 universities, namely the University of Indonesia, Bandung Institute of Technology, and Gajah Mada University. And quality has long been of concern to the policymakers in Indonesia's higher education sector. To make an example, as of the end of 2017, only 65 out of nearly 4,500 universities hold the grade of A in their accreditation status. Most of the underperforming universities are privately owned. Many of them offer substandard educational services, which in turn produce poor quality graduates. This is one of the main reasons behind the high unemployment rate among Indonesian graduates, which has continued to increase. It is this alarming trend that has driven the Ministry of Research, Technology, and Higher Education to make plans to close or merge 1,000 private campuses starting in 2019-2020. To improve the quality of local universities, the government has been encouraging reputable foreign universities to open branches in Indonesia or team up with local universities. And many of these campuses have partnered with foreign universities through lecture and student exchanges, grants, scholarships, dual degree programs, joint research, training, and publications. Next, there are the institutes which are specialized university-level higher education institutions. These institutes offer only academic programs in particular fields. Advanced schools, or referred to as sekolah tinggi, also known as schools of higher learning, are very common in Indonesia. In 2019, there were 2,308 such institutions. The advanced schools tend to be smaller, private, and offer specialized programs. And they typically offer undergraduate programs leading to a diploma 4 or a bachelor's degree. Some of them offer graduate programs too. As of 2018, there are 257 polytechnics in Indonesia, and they generally offer shorter, employment-geared vocational diploma programs. Academy and community academies are dedicated to vocational education at the undergraduate level. They can either be private or public. Community academies were initially set up as public institutions to prepare students, including adult students, for local employment and to meet the labor needs of the regions where they are located. Now, community academies can be privately owned as long as they offer low-cost diploma programs in vocational fields of local relevance. And the Indonesian government intends to establish a community academy in each district of the country. Okay, now let's take a look at the undergraduate level of education in Indonesia, which is known as Sarjana Strata 1 or S1. The S1 undergraduate programs in standard academic disciplines usually last 4 years or 8 semesters, and they typically require the completion of 144 to 150 credit units of coursework as well as a thesis. Curricula are mostly specialized apart from some mandatory general education subjects. These include religion, national history, and Pancasila, which is Indonesian state philosophy. The degree awarded is the Sarjana in the related discipline. For example, the Sarjana Science, which is the degree in science, or Sarjana Ilmu Komputer, degree in computer science, or Sarjana Pendidikan, or degree in education. In this slide, we have a sample of the Sarjana S1 degree, which is an undergraduate degree awarded after 4 years of study. The degree is issued in both Indonesian and English. This is the transcript which has been issued in English by the university. This is the S1 transcript. Graduate level is known as Sarjana Strata 2 or S2, and it is also referred to as Magister. Admission criteria to the graduate studies requires the S1 or the Sarjana degree in the related disciplines, and entrance exams and proficiency in English may also be required. Graduate degrees are usually 2 years in duration and require 36 to 50 credits that include coursework, thesis, or a graduation project. The credential earned at the graduate level is called the Magister. The doctoral level is known as Sarjana Strata 3, or the S3. It is also called Doctor. The Magister or Sarjana Strata 2, ST, with a high GPA is a requirement for admission. The doctoral studies require a minimum of 3 years of study that include coursework, comprehensive exams, preparation and defense of a dissertation. The title of the credential awarded is called Doctor. There are also diploma programs that are offered in vocational fields and are focused for employment purposes. They can take anywhere from 1 to 4 years of study. If you see a diploma with the classification D4, then it has been considered to be at the same level as the S1 Sarjana degree within the Indonesian qualifications framework. And typically credentials awarded are called Sarjana Terapan or degree in applied science. The students with D1, D2, or D3 level credentials may transfer to academic Sarjana programs, and some with D4 may be admitted to S2 Magister graduate programs. Professional disciplines like architecture, dentistry, medicine, or veterinary medicine that train individuals for professional practice require completion of upper secondary, senior high school for admission and are between 5 to 6 years in length. For example, in medicine, there is the Sarjana Kedoktoran, which requires 4 to 5 years of study, but does not qualify the individual for professional practice. To be able to qualify for professional practice as a physician in Indonesia, one must complete 3.5 years of preclinical study, followed by 2 years of clinical work, and a 1-year mandatory clinical internship after graduation. And the degree earned is a Doctor of Medicine. Medical specialties require additional 3 to 5 years of training and lead to a Specialist Diploma Level 1 or Specialist 2, which is more in depth. Here we have the Indonesian Institutions of Higher Education, which use a number of different grading scales. Most are similar to the U.S. letter grade scale of A to B. Some have plus and minus signs and some don't, and some may even use grades like A, B, B, C, or C, D. You'd need to refer to the transcript for information on the grading scale by the institution. This slide represents a grading scale variation that is most commonly used. Now I will turn this over to Jasmine so that we can take a look at Indonesia and its potentials for student exchange and partnerships with U.S. institutions.
Thank you so much, Alan. Well, we would be fooling ourselves if we don't acknowledge the challenges facing U.S. institutions and exploring opportunities in Indonesia. For any U.S. institution keen on exploring Indonesia for international education partnership, it is important to be aware of the strong competition that's already in play in the region by countries such as Australia, Singapore, UK, Malaysia, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Canada, and China. The Indonesian government has been focused on revamping its higher education sector in recent years to keep pace with global competition from its neighbors, especially Malaysia and Thailand. And this strategy serves two purposes. First, to provide a better level of education for its own youthful population, and second, to lure more international students to study in the country. For the past 10 years, U.S. institutions have been losing significant market share to rivals, especially Indonesia's neighboring countries like Australia, due to high costs of tuition fees at U.S. institutions. Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, UK, Japan, New Zealand, and Korea have aggressively promoted their education programs in Indonesia. Currently, Australia is the #1 choice for Indonesian students, largely due to the geographic proximity, the perceived institutional quality, and English language instruction. The number of Indonesian students choosing to study in Australian higher education institutions has increased by more than 8% in the past year. 1 in 4 Indonesian students who study at universities overseas have chosen to study in Australia, and more than 20,000 Indonesian students are studying in Australia right now, starting from vocational training to university level. Then we have New Zealand, China, Malaysia, Canada, and Singapore, who have joined forces with each other in announcing their intention to attract more Indonesian students. China, in particular, increased scholarships in the country after witnessing a 42% enrollment surge at its universities in 2007 through 2009. And Malaysia became the second most popular destination for Indonesian students in 2010, which is reflective of an Indonesian focus on affordability and cultural similarities. So now that we know who the competition is and what it is doing, you may be wondering if there's any hope for the U.S. You may even be asking, does the U.S. have a fighting chance? And the answer is yes. Do not despair. There is a bright side to the competition U.S. facing with countries like Australia, UK, Canada, and China. U.S. innovation and ingenuity, its vast number of institutions of higher education, and the wide array of fields of study are still admired and looked at with high regard. U.S. colleges and universities are the preferred overseas destination for Indonesian students, despite significant competition from countries like UK and Australia. There are several factors that make the U.S. a leading destination, and chief among them is higher employment opportunities after graduation when returning back home to Indonesia. When the global job market is becoming so increasingly competitive, the Indonesian undergrad and grad students look to studying abroad as the path to success. There is also the high quality of U.S. education that is revered. In the 2017-2018 academic year, there were 8,650 students from Indonesia studying in the U.S. Indonesia is the 19th leading place of origin for foreign students studying in the U.S. Over 96% of all student visas are granted by the U.S. Embassy in Indonesia. And 95% of Indonesians studying abroad are self-funded. This group of students finance their education privately with financial support from their parents or assistance from overseas relatives. The remaining 5% of students are financed by local universities, companies, the government, and scholarships through different grants. In this chart, we see the 5 most popular academic majors which Indonesian students choose to study in the U.S. Business management, engineering, life science, math and computer science, and health professions. It's interesting to note that Indonesian students who are studying at Australian universities are also gravitating toward degrees in education, natural and physical sciences, agriculture, and environmental studies. To compete with other countries which offer lower tuition fees, U.S. universities are encouraged to participate in the 1+1 or the 1+3 or the 2+2 programs, which enable students to apply credits from the years of study at the local university towards an undergraduate degree at a U.S. university. Studying at U.S. community colleges has also become an increasingly popular option for Indonesian students. Some 40% of Indonesians applying for student visas to the U.S. have been accepted at a community college, and half of the top 10 school destinations are community colleges. So be open to exploring dual degree programs with Indonesian universities. And finally, vocational schools have increasingly become targets of Indonesian government interests. The Indonesian government is planning to improve the current vocational education system with multiple skills certificates, in which vocational school students can earn certificates after completing training courses in addition to their high school graduation diploma. This system could speed up the process for workforce employment. Data from the Education and Culture Ministry in Indonesia shows that Indonesia currently has more than 13,000 vocational schools, each of which specialize in one of several fields, including tourism, business, maritime industries, machinery, and so forth. The government also has invited business players to contribute in an expanded role to shape the curriculum and set the skill standards that are relevant to the demands of the job market. Business is also expected to provide internship opportunities and on-site training programs for both students and teachers. There may be opportunities here for U.S. vocational schools to partner with Indonesian vocational schools to support the development of curriculum and establish a presence in Indonesia. In addition, U.S. vocational schools may enjoy increasing appeal as opportunities to gain overseas education and employment experience. The U.S. Commercial Service notes that more than 90% of Indonesians study abroad are self-funded. As I mentioned earlier, they're financially supported by their parents or their overseas relatives. The rest, as we discussed, are on grants or scholarships from the Indonesian government or receive them from universities or private companies. Some foreign institutions are partnering with the Indonesian government's Indonesia Endowment Fund for Education, which is a scholarship program set to boost their chances of enrolling Indonesian students. Most students abroad are enrolled in undergraduate programs, but we can anticipate more demand for postgraduate studies as a result of the Indonesian government's greatly increased funding for this endowment fund. STEM degrees, business programs, and hospitality training courses are very popular. Language institutes and pathway programs have also excellent opportunities, given the relatively low level of English language proficiency among Indonesian students who are hoping to enroll in English-taught degree programs. If you and your institution need assistance with setting up partnerships with Indonesia's institutions for the 1+1, 2+2 pathway programs, we at ACEI can offer you our expertise through our advisory services. There are also many education fairs that take place in Indonesia throughout the year. We have compiled a list of the upcoming events for pretty much the end of 2019 and 2020. Many education agents in Indonesia also have their own fairs. Some of the education fairs in 2019, as you can see, are the ones shown here as, I think the most upcoming one would be in September. On this slide, we have a list of the main in-country resources for you to contact: the Education USA offices, the Ministry of Education and Culture, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, the Ministry of Research, Technology, and Higher Ed, and the American Indonesian Exchange Foundation. There's also the U.S. Commercial Service contact, which is a very helpful source for you if you wish to engage in partnerships with and connecting with the Indonesian institutions. In the next slides, we have a number of useful links, and as I said earlier, a recording of this webinar will be made available for you, so you will have access to all of this information within 2 to 3 days. To recap, it's important to remember that as the world's 4th and most populated country, Indonesia has a high proportion of young people making up its demographics. A study by the United Nations Population Fund in 2015 revealed that Indonesia is projected to reap a demographic dividend by between 2028 to 2035. So what is a demographic dividend? A demographic dividend occurs when the proportion of the working age population is larger than the infant and elderly population and presents a unique opportunity for intense economic growth. By 2035, it's projected that Indonesia will have a workforce of 65 million young people and therefore productive citizens. This demographic dividend will provide a golden opportunity for Indonesia to become a developed country if it's able to improve and prepare its human resources. So given all of this information and the possibilities and the potentials that Indonesia provides, we leave you with this question. Are U.S. higher education institutions prepared to attract and embrace Indonesian students who are looking to study at their institutions? Well, this brings us to the conclusion of our webinar presentation. If you have any questions, we have some minutes available, so we encourage you to type in your questions for us. If no questions arise right now, don't hesitate to email either Alan or myself. We have our contact information right here for you. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions even post-webinar. I see a question from Maria Blanca. If we do not have dual program, how else can we host the international students from Indonesia? That is a good question. Well, if you do not have that, the other opportunity would be if you have the facilities to perhaps expand maybe an English language program and offer it in Indonesia. Maybe partner with an Indonesian institution and offer your English language program there in country rather than have the students come to this country. The other one is to perhaps look at your fields of specialty and see if there's any there that is of significant interest that meets the demand of these students. For example, I think we just discussed that STEM subjects as well as business and subjects in the health professions. If your institution has those, you may be able to package them as such that they can be attractive and competitive with your counterparts in countries like Australia or Canada. Again, I think portraying the U.S. higher education as significantly stronger with a much more robust international student history than I would even say our Australian or Canadian counterparts is a wonderful selling point. I don't want to say that, but I guess that's what we're in. But those would be some suggestions that I have for you. And perhaps you could begin to consider maybe accepting at least some transfer credit from institutions from universities in Indonesia that are comparable to your general education. I hope that was a helpful response for you. Thank you. The question was, would the results of the UN be available on the SMA? The SMA will not provide that. As you saw from the sample that we submitted, there is a separate document that will have the results of the Ujian Nasional, the national and external exam. So that would be something you could easily request, and it can easily be provided. And let's see if there's additional questions coming up here, and I will try and respond. This is a question from Nathan Kemp. How does the Indonesian government determine that what vocational areas to focus on? Is this available to the public? I believe it is. I cannot be certain for that, but the vocational areas right now, it will be very it's local-centric. So it's really depends on the region within the country and the needs of that region. But I believe that this would be a good question to pose to the Ministry of Education and Culture, and you have their contact information in the links that we've provided for you. There's a question from Katie Carter. The question is, we are seeking an increasing number of applicants from international high schools. Would you expect documents from these schools, transcripts and SMA, to be issued in both English and Indonesian? We're being told documents are only available in English because the school is more internationally focused. That is correct, particularly if they are following, let's say, the International Baccalaureate, or if these are private institutions, they will be following the curriculum that is synonymous with the education system. If they're following the U.S. system, then it will be a U.S. style transcript issued in English. If they're following the International General Certificate of Education, the IGCSEs, you will be seeing the external results from the IGCSE External Examining Board. Or if it's the International Baccalaureate, it would be the diploma of with the final results issued by the body that administers the IB. Maria Blanca, yes, you asked. Yes, we have STEM programs at your institution. And what are the top areas? Data science, computer science, yes, yes, and yes. Math, computer science, computer programming, all of the hip, trendy computer science programs, these would be the ones. Anything that has to do with, kind of the cutting edge in information technology. There's a question from Ramsami Nukadi. The question is, are the private universities and advanced schools empowered by law to award qualifications, or is it restricted to public institutions? As I mentioned earlier, and I think Alan also said, institutions in Indonesia, private or public, are not as autonomous as we are experienced to here. There's a lot more control and kind of administrative control over them by the government. So if they each, as Alan went through, whether they're advanced institutes or community academies or the polytechnics, they're each authorized to award certain qualifications. And those will be then ranked according to the qualification framework that we had mentioned earlier. Another good question, Nathan. The question is, to what extent are low English skills keeping otherwise qualified Indonesian students out of international universities? Are there particularly strong models of English pathway programs you know of? The percentage of English-speaking skills from Indonesian students is low. It is a language, English is just now being embraced by some of the public institutions that offer even elementary and secondary education. The government is pushing toward this. The universities offer it as the medium of instruction is Indonesian. English is slowly being introduced. This is why I feel offering intensive English language programs by reputable universities here in the U.S. in country, in Indonesia, is an absolute smart way of introducing U.S. higher education. In addition, as far as I know, the U.S. State Department is making it very difficult for students who want to come to the U.S. to simply pursue intensive English language program. So visas aren't being granted that easily anymore. But there's no stopping a university from the U.S. to take its English language proficiency pathway program and offer it in country. And this would be where a partnership with an Indonesian university and working together with the ministry would be the best way to move forward. Taking your program there, offering these language schools, bringing that sort of focus and attention and immersion to the language in country, and making them, helping the students become familiar with not just the English, but also U.S. culture and study techniques and learning techniques. This is a really wonderful way to introduce U.S. higher education in the country. I'm scrolling through the questions, and oh, you're welcome, Nathan. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions. Again, I know questions will come up as you step away and you have other thoughts. Please feel free to contact Alan and myself, and we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from your personal experiences. If you find any information that you think would complement what we've just presented, we'd really appreciate that, because we're open to add to this compendium of facts. So please keep us posted. And of course, we will also stay connected with you and keep you posted on any new developments on this country and future webinar topics. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it and wish you a happy day. Thank you.